Okay, continuing on with 1.5 and 3.6 notes regarding limits. Now we're going to talk about limits as x approaches infinity. But before we actually talk about that, we need to talk about vertical and horizontal asymptotes. So let's review that just a little bit. Go ahead and pause the video here, write this down, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so vertical asymptotes, again, is where the denominator is set equal to 0, and it's the zeros of the simplified form. So in other words, you cannot divide by 0, so that causes us to have vertical asymptotes. That's where we had examples where, again, it increases without bound. So if we were talking about, again, something that looked like this, we would have a vertical asymptote right through here, and again, that would signify it does not exist. Horizontal asymptotes will help us as we're talking about it approaching positive or negative infinity, and we typically look at the degrees of the numerator, this stands for the numerator, and the denominator of our equation. Okay, if the degrees are the same, the actual horizontal asymptote is y equals a over b, where a and b are the leading coefficients of the numerator and denominator. If the numerator is greater than, so in other words, you'll hear me say things like top heavy, then there is no horizontal asymptote. So it typically goes to usually negative infinity or positive infinity. If the numerator is less than, so in other words, bottom heavy, it automatically is y equals 0. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look back at our example here. So if we want to evaluate this as it approaches infinity, we look at the degrees. So the degree of the numerator is 1, the degree of the denominator here is 2. So this is what we call bottom heavy. So that means that it's going to have a vertical asymptote of y equals 0. So in other words, our limit's going to be 0. Okay, so again, as it's going to its extreme of infinity. Let's take a look at our next example here. Okay, with this example, again, we want to take a look at our degrees, because again, this one's now going to infinity, or sorry, negative infinity. Since the degree of the numerator is 3 and the degree of the denominator is 2, this is an example of one that's top heavy. Therefore, there is no horizontal asymptote. So we probably want to take a look at this in a little bit more detail, and we actually probably want to graph this, and so we can see what's going on there. So go ahead and get out your calculator, plug this in your calculator, and then push play to resume. Okay, so you can see here, here's the graph once you plug that in. So as it's going to negative infinity, this one is approaching positive infinity, so you could either say does not exist, or I would also take infinity for this answer. Excuse me. So again, taking a look here, it's approaching as it's going to negative infinity. It's approaching infinity. So it does not exist or infinity. We do have one more example. We'll get to that in a little bit, but for now, that concludes the first day of limits regarding sections 1.5 and 3.6.